Okay, good evening, everybody. Sorry that was a little longer than we thought. We had a little technical difficulty, but it is 6:42, and I'll call the meeting to order, and in doing so, I'll ask everybody to please silence their cell phones and other personal devices. I have a motion moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that Council approve the February 19th, 2019 agenda as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest, and if so, please state the general nature thereof. There are none noted. Any announcements this evening? Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. This week, Saturday, February 22nd, is the History Open House, the Brighton History Open House, and we've had many volunteers putting a lot of hours in to put this together. It will be at the Community Centre from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., and there will be a heritage tea luncheon for just $5, and I just want to invite everyone here, as well as council, to show up and be part of this. It's going to be a great day and lots of information there, and I think it'll be enjoyable for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any other announcements? Councillor Tadman.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted, for those who didn't hear me earlier, I had the pleasure of judging at the Brighton Public School Science Fair, and it ties in very well with, we have a member from Lower Trent here that have a contest each year for caring for the wetlands, and their projects were amazing, and hopefully they'll enter into that. The kids do some amazing jobs with those science fairs, and we should be all very proud of them.
Thank you. Any other announcements? I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that Council received the February 4th, 2019 Special Council and Regular Council meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that Council received the February 11th, 2019 Committee of the Whole meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that Council received the February 11th, 2019 Council Planning meeting minutes as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. We do not have a statutory public meeting this evening. We'll move straight into delegations. So I'll ask Bev Woods to please come up. There's a button on the side closest to Councillor Rowley, and then there's a button right in front of you that you push when you talk. So Bev, I'll turn the floor over to you when you're ready.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me here tonight. A couple of weeks ago, you presented a Gift from the Heart Day to come up in the town municipality of Brighton. So I just wanted to give you some information about what that was all about. So I will move forward. So who are we? Who is the Gift from the Heart? Well, our mission is to, it's a national organization whereby dental hygienists and volunteers and corporate partners come together to make a difference by enhancing the lives of Canadians by providing no-cost dental hygiene care on one day every year. So the Gift from the Heart strives to enhance the overall wellness of Canadians by providing dental hygiene care without limitations. I'm guessing it's down here. I don't know how you advance on yours. I'll try this button. No. Previous. I'm trying, there. Okay, so it all happens on Saturday, April the 6th. Can I guess? Keyboard? I'm trying, it's not doing anything, so just bear with me, sorry. I'm just gonna keep hitting there. So together we're making a difference one smile at a time. Perfect. Our journey. It started in 2008 when I opened my own dental hygiene practice on the military base in Trenton. And it was my time, after many years of being a dental hygienist, to show my social responsibility to my community by providing some type of care back to those in need. And if we look around us every single day, there's someone, probably one of our neighbors even, who is in need and is in, living in silence because of not being able to access affordable dental hygiene care. So what I did was I reached out. At that time, it was very new in the province of Ontario to have dental hygienists being their own business owners. And there was 25 dental hygienists that own their own business. 16 of them said, sure, I'm on board with you, and let's do this event. So I started, it was in the month of February then. And I felt that February was a month where we all needed a little bit of love, so I called it the Gift from the Heart. Fast forward 10 years, where are we today? Well, it still is owned and operated by one person. I will not name names. It is a national event now that is tied and linked into National Dental Hygienist Week all across Canada. Hundreds of locations. Today I counted over 140 different locations across Canada. Thousands of volunteers that go with that. We have corporate partners who provide the necessary sundries, gloves, masks, bibs, all those things that we need to put the day on, plus all types of packages to give out of hygiene products for people to take home on that day. So I have been recognized in a few spots. I was in Italy a couple years ago where I won the Social Responsibility Second Place Prize for Gift from the Heart, showing just how one person can make a difference. It just takes a lot of passion and a lot of volunteer times to make that happen. I spoke to 37 other global partners endorsing what it takes to try to make a difference. Though one person alone can't do it, together we are an army. Sorry, I apologize. Let's try every button I can. Okay, put that in your strategic plan. We need a new computer. It's not working. I could probably just... Sorry. There we go. So that was just me in Italy. I just wanted to update you that I've now been selected to return back now to Brisbane, Australia this summer, and to give an update on where the Gift from the Heart has proceeded and since that last meeting in Italy. So do you know the economic burden of oral health has on Canadians? It's estimated that 6 million school days are lost annually due to dental visits or dental sick days. 4.15 million work days are lost to adults for the same purpose and same reasons. So overall, there's an average of 3.5 hours per year in the loss of per person to dental disease. Dental hygienists are the preventative aspect to oral health, and oral health is linked to overall health, and we all know those statistics. Dental hygienists are primary health professionals. I don't think everybody realizes the amount of education that goes into being a dental hygienist and how we're an intricate part of the healthcare system. There are over 29,000 dental hygienists that are registered to practice alone in Canada. I wish I could get a tenth of those people to volunteer hours on the Gift from the Heart Day. It would be fabulous, because if we all saw one person, can you imagine the difference that we will make? So I wanted to let you know a little bit what's happening here in Brighton. So do you all know that there's an independent dental hygienist here in Brighton at Whole Health? Her name is Jen Arbuckle, and I've come out of retirement and joined her practice on a volunteer basis to actually participate and help grow her practice for providing dental hygiene care. So we're going to be together here on April the 6th at Whole Health, providing oral cancer screenings, free care to those in need. So we'll be putting posters up throughout the community as well. Also, I just secured a location at Mike the Molar in Trenton, Ontario. They have gifted their office space, which is huge. I mean, there's 12 or 13 chairs there. So we're going to open a secondary space in that area as well. So there's lots of things that we can be providing to people. So what can you do to help? Well, stop by Whole Health if you're around on Saturday, April the 6th. Get out there and be our ambassadors. I can't do it alone, and if you all were to get out there and talk about this day coming up and how there's free dental hygiene care to anybody who's in need, and that need increases. When I first started this project, it was the working poor, the elderly, those people who no longer had any type of insurance through their employers. But that need is just grown tremendously, especially with our mental health population is growing so much. The fear to be outside their own homes is greatly increased, and therefore we have a lot of mobile dental hygienists getting out there and going to their homes to provide the free care. So it has grown a lot. I'm really proud of what I've started and continue to grow. The only thing I ask for is financial support at this point. It is getting too hard to do this all on my own anymore. So I'm always looking for help and volunteers to help me. So I just wanted to bring that information to you today to tell you that even in your small municipality of Brighton, we're trying to make a difference.
Thank you very much, Bev. And don't... You can put a picture of all of council on the website, because we're all going to gather for that picture.
Perfect.
Everybody, let's go.
Do you want me to come up behind you? Bring the toothbrushes. I can take it. Okay.
Thanks. I've got way too much stuff here.
You can close that now.
Well, it's a dental picture, smile.
Oh, that's a big piece. Okay.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Don't go to it. Also make a fuss.
Okay. I'm right here. Thank you.
So before I read the motion, does members of council have any questions for Ms. Woods? Mr. Councillor Bateman?
Not a question, just a comment. Thanks for the presentation. I'm aware of this program because my daughter is actually a dental hygienist in London, so she lectures her two younger brothers about this all the time.
Any other comments or questions from council? I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that the delegation from Bev Woods regarding gift from the heart be received. Any further discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Thank you very much, Bev.
Thank you.
I have one citizen's comment this evening, and it's from Mr. Scott Anderson regarding planning and red tape and the Lower Trent Conservation Authority, and it's coming out of his correspondence to us under Section 16 of the agenda. Mr. Anderson?
You're good to go.
Thank you. Anyway, I applied in May to give 3 acres of my property to my granddaughter to build a house. And ever since then, it's been an absolute nightmare. The big hold-up was the Conservation Authority red tape. They forced us to spend $2,000 to have expert look over this piece of property to make sure there's no hazards on it. Now, why they couldn't have sent one of their own people who are supposed to be experts, I don't know. But $2,000 is a lot of money. That's 4 of my pension checks, and I wasn't too happy with that. And so far, I've been consulting with your planning department, and the planner from Peterborough, had a meeting with him, and still they consider a hazard of some sort on this property. Now, they did provide me with a hazard map, which is, well, I'd call it a doodle map, because it's got little lines going all over the place. They go nowhere, and they're absolutely meaningless. Erosion lines from Lake Ontario? I don't think so. It'd have to come all the way in from the lake, through the bay, up a drainage ditch, and then to this piece of property, and I don't think that's going to happen. And even at that, with the big flooding we had a few years ago from the experts in the St. Lawrence Seaway, no water came out of that property, not a drop. And the expert that came and looked over the property, 17 pages of identifying trees and grass and weeds and everything else. She didn't find any frogs or anything in the drainage ditch. The Lower Trents map shows that drainage ditch as being a stream. It's a drainage ditch, for God's sake. It's a storm sewer. And it was dug by a farmer years ago. This piece of property was all farmland at one time, and there's still old fruit trees throughout it. And fruit trees do not grow in wetlands. No fruit-bearing tree will survive wetlands. When we had that flooding a few years ago, the cherry trees died off. They drowned, believe it or not, because of the water sitting there. So anyway, regardless, this whole simple process has just become an absolute nightmare. And I think all they're doing, the Lower Trent are doing nowadays, is create red tape. And the last thing we need is more red tape.
So, Mr. Anderson, that's the 3 minutes you're allotted for citizens' comments. We do have your correspondence in the agenda.
Yeah.
So thank you very
I
much.
just hope planning gets their act together.
I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Vink, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that Council receive citizens' comments of the February 19th, 2019 Council meeting. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. We're moving on to staff reports. Our first staff report is from the consultant Olivia Sparrow, professional engineer from Emmons and Olivier, with regard to our Stormwater Master Plan Class EA. And this report did... Okay. Is she? Brilliant. And I've just been informed you're doing a presentation.
Yes,
How nice.
if you want me to.
Oh yeah, I think everybody would want you to. So when you're ready, the floor is yours.
All right, through the mayor, thank you so much for having me today. Is this on? Yes? Okay. I'm Olivia Sparrow. I've been the project manager on the Brighton Stormwater Master Plan. We started in April last year, and I'm joined here today by my colleague Annalise Grieve, who led the class environmental assessment components of the project. So thanks so much for having us here today. I'll first give an overview of the problem, what we were trying to address in this Stormwater Master Plan, the solution, the plan components, and then give an overview of the Class EA process and the next steps for the plan. So this will hopefully give Council a brief overview of what's included in our recommendations in the Stormwater Master Plan and seek Council's adoption of the plan. So first up, for what is the problem? So as areas develop, they introduce more and more impervious surfaces, so pavement, buildings, things like that. And that really changes how rainfall becomes runoff and how it moves through communities. So this figure at the bottom illustrates that it really switches how much runoff is created when it rains in these urban areas, and it depletes how much rainfall infiltrates into the ground. in addition to impervious surfaces increasing the amount of runoff, it also increases the amount of pollutants, and those pollutants are carried into water bodies and causes degradation, both of the ecosystems in those water bodies and of beneficial uses. So here in Brighton, with Presqu'île Bay being a key focal point for commercial and recreational uses, those would be degraded as well. So as part of the project, we looked at what quality control deficiencies there were. So how well is the municipality's current stormwater system controlling stormwater quality? So common in urban areas that include some mature neighborhoods, a significant portion of the study area, 83%, are not controlled by stormwater management facilities. So these areas were developed before stormwater management was common. We also identified a lack of or insufficient erosion controls being implemented as part of land development projects. Shown an example there on the top left where sediment is eroding from disturbed areas and getting into the municipality's storm sewer and subsequently into the ponds. Another part of our study was assessing, going out and inspecting each of the 8 ponds within the study area and assessing how much sediment has accumulated in those ponds. So there's a bit of a domino effect going on with unfortunately, a little bit of a lack of maintenance on the upfront end. Routine maintenance like removing vegetation from outlet structures. The picture on the bottom left here shows some vegetation debris that's blocking water from the right side, which is Brighton by the Bay Pond, from entering into that structure through perforations and slowing down how quickly the pond should drain down. So this domino effect ends up elevating water levels and causes some vegetation die-off on the banks of the ponds, and then that causes bank erosion, which sends even more sediment into the ponds. So this combination of the domino effect of routine maintenance becoming kind of more intensive maintenance needs, in addition to the lack of erosion control, has led to a rapid accumulation of sediment in the municipality's ponds. And the plan identifies a need for pond cleanouts. We phased them in, but in total, almost $740,000 in cleanout costs. So the next slide goes over quantity control deficiencies. A major part of our study was sifting through a significant amount of old design drawings and mapping that the municipality has from previous studies and developing the municipality's first hydrologic and hydraulic model. So this is a great tool for the municipality, consultants, peer review engineers, and developers to have a clear picture of currently how is the existing stormwater system performing. For this study, we used it to give a clear picture of how the system's performing. A typical level of service expected of storm sewers is that they're able to convey the 5-year event. Right now, 19% of the storm sewer pipes in the Brighton urban area would exceed capacity during that 5-year event, and a quarter of the structures, that means things like catch basins, would flood. In some instances, this is a rapid flooding where water would back up the storm sewers and reach the top of the catch basin and pop over it and then back down. And then in some instances, it would stay flooded for a longer period. We also used the urban area model to evaluate how the ponds are performing in containing stormwater during events. And a few of the ponds, so Brighton by the Bay, Ruse, Lucas, and Orchard Gate Pond, would overtop during major storm events. So in addition, we also looked at overland flow routes. There are a few points around the municipality where there are depressions in the landscape, things like sags in the road, and rear yard drainage areas that may have insufficient overland flow routes. And Another factor we assessed was looking at how extreme lake levels, like what happened in spring 2017, how that would affect draining out of the storm water system. And so some of these deficiencies in the lower areas near the lake shore would be exacerbated during those conditions. And the last point here is that there's also a lack of water balance controls. So if you recall on that slide where I was showing the amount of runoff increases with impervious surface, right now the practices that are being implemented by developers don't control the increase in volume. What they do is they control the speed of runoff. And so right now, as development continues in Brighton, there's more and more runoff volume being directed into the creeks and into the bay. And for cold water streams like Butler Creek and Arena Creek, that's not a good thing. And we'll talk about some of the impacts of that on the next slide here. So the cumulative effects of this increase in volume of runoff and pollutants is starting to degrade the systems. Like Butler Creek is showing signs of warming through Brighton. That's not good for the cold water fish and biota, and they're showing the same response where they're not as healthy as they were 5 years ago. And these impacts will continue unless they're mitigated. And right now, the conventional pond end-of-pipe approach is insufficient to prevent these impacts moving forward. So best practices in stormwater management are evolving really quickly across Ontario. Lots of municipalities are starting to introduce new practices. I've shown here kind of the range where on the left side, starting from the earliest point in a system, pollution prevention or good housekeeping, that includes erosion control, cleaning out catch basins, sweeping streets, and then moves into source control, capturing rainfall from rooftops close to where the raindrop falls. Site controls are similar to rain gardens, things at the end of a residential block to capture runoff from that street. And then the end-of-pipe controls are the ponds and the oil grit separators that are commonly used in Brighton. And as you move to the right, with the last point here being resource restoration, the solutions become more expensive, both upfront and in the long-term operation and maintenance cost. So, what is the solution? What we've outlined in the plan is a subwatershed approach. So we've grouped the combination of deficiencies so that they can be addressed in single projects for those subwatersheds. And we've used a few levels of service where facilities would be expected to contain the 100-year event and sewers would be expected to convey the 5-year event. And we've used those levels of service to estimate how much storage capacity needs to be retrofitted into these subwatersheds. And that's what the subwatershed implementation costs are based on in the implementation schedule. In the proposed approach to these projects is a treatment train approach. So it's looking at the source control, conveyance, site control, including water quality, treatment enhancements into the storm sewer systems, and end of pipe when the earlier low impact development green infrastructure solutions aren't feasible. And then in addition to that, we're also including the non-structural solutions like new policies and maintenance programs. And so this treatment train approach, there are a number of benefits. I'm happy to talk about it more, but it's common across Ontario now as the new best practice because it addresses multiple water quality and quantity concerns. And in addition, they're also becoming very popular with communities where it goes along with green streets and greening communities, enhancing quality of life as well. So next up, the plan components. So I'll first go through the implementation schedule. and then go through the plan elements. So what we're recommending is that in year one, the municipality continue existing activities and launch the maintenance program. I've separated out here the Harbor Point Pond cleanout because it is an expensive line item that we're recommending in year one, and that's part of the maintenance program. We're also recommending staff training to inform erosion sediment control inspections, and that the municipality implement the new standards we're recommending and begin holding securities to fund major investments like pond cleanouts in the longer term. In year two, we're recommending that the municipality conduct a stormwater user fee feasibility study, and this will inform how the rest of the plan will be funded. So Appendix G of the plan went through a detailed comparison of funding options that municipalities have for financing stormwater management programs, and the stormwater user fee was the recommended approach, and we're recommending the feasibility study in year two to gather more public input on what form that user fee takes, and begin implementing the fee, phasing in the fee and phasing out the tax levy reliance, starting in year three, and then gradually increasing the user fee to fully fund the stormwater program. So I just went over this. That's the funding strategy. And I'm happy to talk about that more if council has questions. The maintenance program components include maintaining an inventory of stormwater infrastructure, inspecting those components annually, monitoring the ponds as required by the environmental compliance approvals, and beginning erosion control inspections of construction projects. As well, implementing the preventative maintenance to prevent the domino effect I was describing earlier. That includes catch basin cleanouts and pond upkeep, like removing debris from maintenance or outlet structures, and implementing the corrective pond cleanouts. And we phased in the pond cleanouts based on prioritizing them around their capacity and current performance. And also developing records of maintenance logs, and annually staff would reassess priorities based on their observations in the previous year. The infrastructure retrofit projects include those subwatershed improvement projects that I mentioned earlier. In addition to that, the municipality we're recommending should implement a proactive approach in incorporating the treatment train approach to stormwater upgrades during road reconstruction projects. And then the other component is the municipality's asset management plan from 2013 identified how much the municipality should invest in replacing storm sewers at the end of their life. Right now there is a funding gap where those replacements aren't being funded, but through the recommended user fee, that funding gap would be addressed starting in 2022. The policies section of the plan outlines recommended updates to the municipality's engineering and design guidelines, controlling stormwater from future development, and implementing and enforcing new erosion control standards. The plan also includes education and outreach recommendations that would gradually be added into the program. Property owner education program, giving information on what property owners can do to better control stormwater. And then once the user fee is established in 2021, offering a credit program where if property owners implement stormwater improvements, they get a credit or a discount from their fee. And then once the user fee is in place, also relying on grants to establish a cost share program to decrease the cost or share the cost of private stormwater retrofits. And of course, stormwater is a shared responsibility across multiple departments, and we've outlined that in the plan. It's not just a capital infrastructure program or public works program. Other departments like finance play a part in implementing the funding strategy. I've already mentioned the staff training. Another point is we've identified a gap where we're recommending the municipality engage a GIS management consultant to assist staff with mapping and other GIS-related tasks. And of course, there are many others that have an interest in improving stormwater management. A few here, I'll just mention the Nature Conservancy and Ducks Unlimited, of course, acquired the land for the Brighton wetland, and they may have an interest in implementing stormwater improvements and could share the cost in some implementation projects. And I'll hand it over to Annalise for the Class EA process.
Okay. As many of you are likely aware, the Stormwater Management Master Plan goes through a class environmental assessment. And a class environmental assessment is a process pursuant to the Ontario Environmental Assessment Act. So there are requirements for consultation, there are requirements for notification, and for comment, public comment periods on the document. So we have proceeded through the class environmental assessment process. This master plan has addressed phases 1 and 2 of the class environmental assessment process. So we've identified the problems and opportunities that the projects are to solve and some of the alternative solutions. As Olivia has just outlined, a lot of the components of the plan, your stormwater master plan, really relate to administrative, maintenance, policy aspects, which don't fall under the approval of an environmental assessment. It is more related to any additional infrastructure projects that may be identified that would be implemented later in the plan, where you would have to proceed through phases 3 to 5 of the class environmental assessment. But I think it is important that we reference, first of all, the consultation that has gone on. We've had a fairly robust consultation process for a project of this nature. The notice of commencement was published back in May. We had a public information center in September. We only had 17 participants, but those were very vocal participants. They were very engaged. They'd done their homework. They had a lot of very in-depth concerns. The draft report was available in mid-December. The Ministry of what we all know as MOE, now Environment and Conservation and Parks, I always say MOE still, requires now that you publish a draft document for comment and then a final document for comment. So the draft plan was out for comment in mid-December, and we received some comments on that, and those are addressed in the document. We also undertook Indigenous communities consultation, which is a requirement of the Act. And these are the Indigenous communities we've consulted with, agency consultation, and a number of progress meetings with the municipality, county, and Lower Trent Conservation Authority. If at this meeting you approve adoption of the master plan, we would be publishing the notice of completion, which would mean that the final master plan document is available for a 30-day comment period. If no comments are received and if no Part 2 order requests are received, then that document can be implemented by council.
And with that, thanks, and we're happy to answer any questions.
So I will open the floor to questions to the presenters from members of council. Anyone? Councilor LeBlanc?
Yes. I was led to believe that this was a planning report. Now I hear it's an EA to be submitted to the Ministry of Environment, basically for a C of A for most of our ponds and our ditches, our creeks.
No.
But you said you needed 30 days for comment.
Okay, so let's be very clear. A stormwater master plan is a plan for a group of activities. So you do master plan documents under the class environmental assessment for transit. You can do them for transportation, for water, wastewater, for waste. In this case, we've done it for stormwater. So it encompasses a number of different activities. The class environmental assessment process is used for projects that are small in nature, frequently recurring, that we understand the effects of those projects, and those effects are easily mitigable. The environmental assessment process is a very different process than the C of A or the environmental compliance approval process under the Environmental Protection Act. That's a very separate process.
Okay.
What this process does is it says, what does your stormwater system look like? And what are the deficiencies with it? What are the problems and what are the opportunities with it? What are we going to have to do to that system overall over the next 20 years or so to make sure it continues to work? And all we've done is address those first two phases of that process. If you were, for example, to build a new pond, if through this planning and through the sub-watershed implementation strategy, you identified a new pond, that pond would then have to undertake the last three phases of the Class EA process. Once that approval was achieved, you would then apply under the Environmental Protection Act for an environmental compliance approval.
Okay.
Okay? So this is the
I understand where you're going.
Okay.
So I've read the report. So I understand this process quite well. So I've helped out a couple of municipalities like Newcastle and different ones where they got caught with their stormwater management ponds and had to be dredged and rebrought back. I've also looked at how our new developments are going. Like if you drive around Brighton, you don't see any silt fences around. You don't see any hay bales to stop the total suspended solids from going through the storm sewers, from settling out. I think some of our storm sewers are built like straight in, straight out. You recommended sumps to be done to catch it because some of our stormwater management ponds are only collecting like 4.6 cubic meters per year. So over 10 years, you've had like 40 cubic meters or 50 cubic meters of silt coming in. I also looked at there's no erosion control.
Do you have a question, Councillor LeBlanc?
I'm going to it.
Okay.
I'm going to it. I'm getting to it. My question is, when we talked about temperature, you got it well documented, but when it comes to temperature, you're talking about Butler Creek and Arena Creek. One of the things that I've noticed with our creeks, because I've lived here for 25 years, this is a tree. As soon as it falls down into the water, it becomes fish habitat. Okay? It's a tree, firewood, fish habitat. Then you get all the backflow of all the water that's not flowing its normal course. So as it stagnates and it grows, you're going to get temperatures that are going to increase in that water because it's not flowing over the water, getting the oxygen and going through. So certain parts of our creek we can't access. The infiltration that's going through it, also going back into the trees and back out, we're not getting the flows that we require. With this master plan, would that give us authority to go and open up these creeks so we can get them back? Because some of your stormwater management ponds basically are directly connected to the creek. If the creek is elevated, it backflows into the pond. They also have to be maintained, which they're not being done now. And it also goes with your temperature. The other thing that comes to the pond,
You asked a question, and I'd like to hear the answer.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, so with vegetation falling down and becoming debris and backing up water levels in the creek, we did not assess if that is a cause of warming in the creek. There isn't really sufficient information, monitoring information, in sufficient detail and where it's collected to assess that. But it is similar to something like a beaver dam, where beaver dams can sometimes be a source of thermal pollution, but they can also sometimes be a cooling source, and it doesn't really make sense sometimes, but it's really when it backs up the water and then it overtops into the floodplain and then it starts recharging and then becomes a cool source. So this plan is focused on upstream of the creek. What are the sources of thermal pollution and what can the municipality do to mitigate those sources, which are very well understood, that impervious surfaces are warmer than pervious surfaces like lawns and prairie grasses and things like that. And it's commonly understood that stormwater ponds, as they're designed and constructed in Brighton right now, are also sources of thermal pollution. So that is the focus of the plan in mitigating those thermal loads. And I know the Lower Trent Conservation is here if they would like to comment on managing debris in water courses, but as you mentioned, it becomes habitat for fish. So that would be a separate assessment to determine what maintenance may or may not be needed.
So I can boil that down to a no.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's not a competition. Your answer doesn't have to be as long as this question.
No.
Councillor LeBlanc, you have another question, I think.
Yes. So if you look at a lot of our ponds are full of silt right now, and we have to dredge them. It's one of the things that we got to do to maintain them, to meet the 5-year, our pipes the 5-year, and the ponds the 100-year study. We also have to look at the cost of this and how it's going to affect every homeowner. Does it affect, when you're looking at the taxes, is it only the people that are on a stormwater management plan it would affect, or would it affect the entire community that would pay the cost?
So what we've proposed is really phasing in the cleanouts so that with the one exception of Harbor Point Pond in that year 1 recommendation, the phasing in would gradually increase dependence on either the tax levy or the stormwater user fee as they're phased in. The increases would be about $150,000 each year once the user fee is starting to be phased in. Council and the public, through that user fee study in year 2, can decide to do that differently, how they're funding it. But as we've proposed it, that cost would be spread across taxpayers and fee payers as the taxes are phased out and the user fee is phased in. But I will add, the reason why we're recommending a variable rate user fee is that would be corresponding to the impervious surface on each property.
The one statement I'm probably misheard. It's Orchard Gate, the pond. You said that it overflowed the pond?
In the model.
In the model, it overflows.
Yes.
Okay, that's quite concerning to me.
At a 100-year storm.
100-year storm.
Yeah, that's quite because we got to address that.
Well, let me ask: is it addressed as part? Is that concern addressed as part of your master plan?
Yes, so it's part of the subwatershed implementation projects where either the pond would need to be retrofitted or using that treatment train approach, more capacity would be added in upstream. Because this is all clearly mapped out as the current performance of the system, there's also, of course, the future phases of development upstream of Orchard Gate, where the municipality, if you choose to adopt the plan, part of the policy updates would identify that future developments that are upstream of capacity deficiencies, like the pond overtopping during the 100-year, would have to over-control stormwater from those areas to not exacerbate known deficiencies.
Thank you. I'll come back to you, Councillor LeBlanc. I just want to make sure we're not missing any questions from other members of council. Councillor Bateman.
Thank you, Mayor. Where we're presently at, the situation we're in, is that due to poor design or lack of maintenance or a combination of the two?
It's a combination of the two. So there has been a lack of maintenance, that's clear, based on the inspections and how quickly sediment is accumulating in the ponds. There's also appears to be a history of designing these ponds for, I'll use the Lucas Pond that's at the end of, I'm forgetting the name. Lucas Court, thank you, that makes sense. I'll use that as an example where it was designed just for the development that it was treating, except that upstream of that development is another contributing area. And so that's why the Lucas Pond overtops much more frequently in the model than Orchard Gate. I think it's the 5-year event where it would overtop. And so part of it is having a fuller view on drainage in Brighton and knowing what all that's draining to each point during the design process.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. My question is more maybe about some of the process. If we commit to approving this tonight, that means we will commit to beginning the undertaking of some of the maintenance, some of the recommendations. I was reading here also...
Just to be clear, if we approve it tonight, it goes to a 30-day consultation period, and only if there's no requests or Part 2 bump up would we then be going down the road of implementation.
Right.
Just to be clear.
I guess, yeah, I didn't maybe explain myself. So after the 30 days,
Right.
then we would be committing to undertaking some of the recommendations in the plan. And in here, you have a draft amount of money. I believe that might have come through our Public Works manager. But we haven't even looked at our budget yet. Do we know that we have enough to then begin covering the costs of these, or can we kind of postpone this a while until we have some budget deliberations?
Council may do as it wishes.
If I could chime in there. So I did meet with Linda and Gary starting in November to discuss the budget as it stood at that point. So one of the changes since December when the final draft was out was adding the Harbor Point Pond cleanout in year one, but Linda's aware of the changes and how much budget would be required in year one, and she's included that in the budget for stormwater services, if that helps. Yeah, sorry.
We haven't begun budget deliberations.
Okay.
That's part of the problem. You're recommending $150,000 operational maintenance cost every year to increase every year over year. Am I reading that correctly?
The increases I was referring to, so they would start in year 3 when the stormwater user fee is implemented. So there is a spike in year 1 with Harbor Point Pond cleanout. Other than that cleanout, my aim was to only have a moderate increase of about $10,000 around there in terms of the routine maintenance and the training and that sort of thing in year 1. In year 2, there was another moderate increase to about $135,000 relied on the tax levy. And then in year 3, with the stormwater user fee, that's when the $150,000 increase would start. And then subsequent to that, each year, the user fee would increase to be phased in.
And if the Harbor Point clean out, what's the value, what's the cost of that?
$121,000 and...
It's okay, that's good enough. Thank you. Councillor LeBlanc.
Thank you. I was looking at some of your costs, like you had $168 per cubic meter. So cubic meter soil, let's say this one's wet, 2.2. So the Brighton tipping fee is $125 a ton. So that would be, for a cubic meter, would be $275 a ton. So that doesn't take into account the labor, the excavation and stuff. But I agree it has to be done. I'm not just looking at some of the costs when you look at the numbers. Unless you went to a table 3 site and you could get rid of it at $10 a ton, right? Which is a fill site. Now, the thing is, the one at Brighton by the Bay, if you notice, you showed us a picture where it comes out of the ditch and out of the road, and the pipe is perfectly clear. Right? Did you notice that? There's no silt in the pipe, but it's submerged. You notice in the center of the ditch? Now, is that because of the type of discharge system that they have with the round pipe with the holes in it that is keeping all the silt and everything? Because they kind of use that as a walking trail for all the geese for 10, 15 years, and now it accumulated with all the sediment that's in there. So would that change? We would have to change that way of discharging that pond.
Few questions there, if I can backtrack from the start. So the 168 cubic meters, or dollars per cubic meter, so that does not include landfilling the dredged material, because we've assumed that the municipality can what's called beneficial reuse of sediment that's dredged.
That's correct.
And so that would be done on site so that there isn't that tipping fee at the landfill. So that's the assumption there, and that's based on sediment sampling that happened in Harbor Point Pond last summer, which came out that there weren't contaminants at a level that would require landfilling. The other question was the harbor near Marina Street with that storm
Yes.
sewer discharging. So it's somewhat clear of sediment, but not clear of water. You saw
realize that,
the
yeah,
water
that's-
level, and that's not the highest that the lake level gets there, and there's only about that much space to discharge. So really, water's just sitting there, and it's not moving.
So what, you'd have to have a freeboard at the pipe, and there is no freeboard. Basically, your pipe is submerged.
Yep.
You should have to have a fall at the pipe, but there is no fall.
Yep. So.
Yep.
I mean, and that's where it comes back to that the extreme lake levels will exacerbate issues. So Brighton by the Bay would overtop during the 25-year storm when lake levels are high, and it would drain down
So not the 100, the
yeah.
25.
25.
Okay.
And that's at the high lake levels. We used the spring 2017 lake levels for that simulation. So I'm not sure what the pipe looks like from Brighton by the Bay down to that outfall. There may be sediment accumulating, but you're right that that outlet structure from Brighton by the Bay is blocking a lot of debris. And it accumulates quickly in those types of outlet structures with the perforated risers. Those perforations are pretty small, and so they would need frequent clean out. So I would expect that there would be less sediment in that system downstream of that pond than if it was an open outlet structure.
And my last question. In your report, you said that the man hours that were required would be a half a man per year or 3/4 of a man per year? And the man hours to maintain, to control the rep birds, to go visit, to clean it out on a continuous basis?
For the pond maintenance, I assumed 4 hours with 2 staff at each pond. And that would be in addition to the inspection time. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what that comes out to each year.
32 hours
Yeah.
plus inspection.
Yeah. So,
So you understand that. I wish we had our budget done and to do this, and this is the problems that I have. This is an excellent report. Very well done.
thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, did I see your hand?
Just to give me a picture of what...
Your microphone, please.
After after a pond is cleaned out, how is it left? How does it look? Right now, there's foliage and you know, all kinds of things growing around it. There's erosion going on. And all. So how is it left? Well, how is it left when you're done?
So we've also provided landscaping guidelines in one of the appendices. I'm forgetting which one now. I think it's I. To the plan. Sorry, can I shuffle over here?
Sorry, it's okay.
So we've provided those landscaping guidelines for whoever the municipality contracts to do this clean out work, that whenever the banks are disturbed and the bottom of the pond is cleaned out, that those surfaces are stabilized with erosion sediment controls, things like erosion control mats, and also planted so that they revegetate and stabilize. We're also recommending that as the municipality maintains these ponds, possibly retrofit some of them as part of the subwatershed improvements, and as developers propose new ponds, that they incorporate native vegetation around these ponds. Another observation is that the common turf grass mowed right to the edge of the water is popular in Brighton, but it also leaves it vulnerable to erosion and the slumping of the bank. So we'd recommend that taller vegetation be established. This will have multiple benefits, including geese deterrent and things like that.
So this would be all at additional costs of what you're talking about here?
No, the 168.
Okay.
So that's an average from a study the Toronto Region Conservation Authority did of retrofits, pond cleanouts, and includes the restoration. It also includes flushing the storm sewers upstream of the pond to make sure that when they clean it out, it's removing all the sediment that was in the pond and in the upstream system.
We just don't want any surprises for the neighbors, no. No, it's a big undertaking, but I agree that if all those things take place and we can resolve the problems, we need to move on, yeah.
Councillor Rowley.
Thank you again. Once again, just looking at the cost, $125,000 per year kind of does a general cleanup. Why is the Harbor Point cleanup so expensive? What's the urgency that it needs to be totally done in year one?
So 2 comments there. Why is it so expensive? It's the amount of sediment that's accumulated. Yes. And then why is it the top priority? So for both the ponds and the subwatersheds, we prioritize them by risk. So the combination of consequence of failure and probability of failure. So with Harbor Point Pond, it has, or was intended to have the largest permanent pool storage volume of all of the ponds. And so that means its consequence of failure is highest relative to the others. It doesn't have the highest probability of failure because others have accumulated or had a larger degradation in removal efficiency. So I think it was Brighton by the Bay has had about 25-ish percentage reduction in treatment efficiency, whereas Harbor Point has a lesser reduction. But it really comes down to that consequence of failure that Harbor Point is the largest pond in terms of permanent pool storage volume. Yep. So for the environmental compliance approvals for each of the ponds, the Ministry of Environment requires that clean out once the removal efficiency is lowered by 5%. So when we're talking about 25% reduction, it's well past the point where a clean out is required. So we have phased in the cleanouts because it's a substantial cost to kind of spread that over multiple years. It's unclear if the ministry would require earlier cleanouts. So wherever possible, if funding can be made available to do these cleanouts earlier, that would be recommended. And these cleanouts will only become more expensive as they're postponed, as sediment continues to accumulate. Yeah.
So you're just to go through this just quickly.
Yep.
So your recommendation is that we definitely look after Harbor Point Pond this year?
Yes.
For sure.
Councillor Bateman.
Just on the Harbor Point Pond, so I got my head wrapped around it. Is that not due for expansion at some point? I don't know if that date's been set. So do we do the clean out, then expand it? Wouldn't that be spending the money twice? Like, don't we want to find out the timeline of the expansion before we...
Do you want to tackle that?
So the municipality has assumed Harbor Point Pond, so it is the municipality's obligation to maintain it. It may or may not be expanded. Future development could include stormwater facilities upstream of the pond. I know the intention was that it would be expanded to treat stormwater from upstream developments, but because it's at the discretion of the developer, unknown timeline, we would recommend that it's cleaned out this year.
Councillor Tadman.
Through you, Mayor, to Olivia. So do you know when that Harbor Point was assumed by the municipality? It's quite a few years ago.
I do not. I know it was expanded in 2004. It was originally built in the mid to late 1990s and then expanded in 2004. I don't know when it was assumed.
Okay, and the other question that follows up and all that, you mentioned the user fees, the stormwater user fees. And did you say that it would be, some of it would be paid by all taxpayers?
Yes.
And it wouldn't just be for the users in the urban area then?
So initially it would be based on the levy.
Right.
Initially. And then the stormwater study, fee study would tell us how to collect the monies in the future.
Okay.
So we don't know the answer to that question.
Further to Councillor LeBlanc's, there's always been this question from some people about the fallen trees and you said you can't answer that. We have someone from Lower Trent. Could they answer that question? If that's okay with the mayor?
I would rather that question be answered when you come to do your presentation, which you will, I assume, in the next 6 to 8 weeks. You usually show up sometime in the early spring, so I would anticipate that. Glenda usually comes with budget. Yeah, okay. let's discuss this with staff offline.
Sure. I just assumed because the representative was here from Lower Trent that she was going to speak.
Well, it's up to
As far as
council.
the
Does council
support.
want to hear about whether we can remove dead shrubs from the streams? All right. All right. If the representatives, no, they'll come back. They'll come back. They're not going anywhere.
Okay. I'm Janet Noyes from Lower Trent Conservation.
Thanks, Janet.
And so the question about trees in the creeks. Yes, that is habitat when the trees fall in the creeks, and there are times when that debris does cause flooding and slowing down of the flow. I think at different points in history we have walked through and identified, trees that could be removed without actually disturbing the flow in the fisheries. I think we've offered to do that twice in the last couple of years, and we're trying to set up meetings with different council members at the time, and it just kind of fell through. So we would be happy to do that again. Part of the issue is we need to access private lands to do that. We don't own the creeks, that kind of thing. So I think the question was if staff could rely on the municipality to help us get ownership, the owners to approve us to go on the lands and take a look, we'd be more than happy to do that. Maybe not in the winter time. Nice August day, yeah.
So I'm sure that's something on the Director of Public Works to-do list at some point in the future.
I'll chat with Preston.
I would appreciate that. Thank you, Janet. Oh, Councillor Tadman, sorry.
Just to follow up on that, Mayor, and through you, Janet, I think the other big problem was that Lower Trent's not going to pay or doesn't have the manpower to take those trees out of there.
Oh, we're not doing the work, no.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you.
That it would be the taxpayers' dime that would be spent to get those out of there.
Yeah, I think the question has always been, what are we allowed to take out, and can we get our staff in there to do so?
And I will concur with Janet that several times there was meetings set up and certain councillors didn't show up to identify the trees. So
I think most of us around this table would see that as an operational issue and would anticipate staff would want to take care of that. So thank you very much.
Good?
You're good. You're good. You're always good until you're not. Councillor LeBlanc, you had another question.
Yes. Now, have you looked at our subdivision development plans for erosion controls, silt control, and how they get to their houses? Have you looked at it? Into this plan and how all the silt gets in? Because I've only been a councillor for 2.5 months, so I got myself really nosy into this, and I've been watching how it all takes place. Did you look at our subdivision?
Can I
development plan?
clarify, are you asking me if I've looked at the plans and the designs or gone out and seen how actually?
Gone out and seen.
Yes,
And we can improve them
yes,
a lot.
yes,
Yes.
And that's part of this plan.
yes.
There are policies in this plan that we can adopt, and that if we do in fact adopt this plan, we would be directing staff essentially to incorporate them.
Yeah. And the only issue I always have right now is I don't know what the budget is to implement the plan.
A lot of money, sir.
Yep, that's not a question.
A lot of money. Councillor Bateman.
Does the cost of this whole plan include like the cleaning and all the maintenance, but does that include fencing these ponds off that's dearly needed?
So we've recommended temporary fencing during construction of projects and during maintenance activities where ground's disturbed to prevent public safety hazards of folks getting into the construction and maintenance areas. Permanent fencing is really a matter that we've recommended that municipality and adjacent property owners discuss further before implementing. It's a topic that's come up in the consultation process where, of course, the municipality has a liability front of mind wanting to fence these areas off. Tackleberry Ridge is an example of a pond that has a fence around it. Definitely needed in that instance because of how steep the pond is and how there's not a lot of buffer area around the pond. But it is contentious, right? Because the adjacent property owners have certain expectations for the existing ponds and what's there, and so they've voiced their preference towards more natural fencing where vegetation is established to deter people. Signs are put up. So the landscaping guidelines do include all of those options for consideration moving forward, where the chain link fencing is one option, the natural fencing is another, and the signage is another option for deterring.
But that's a discussion that the municipality would have with the neighbors of the ponds as we move into that
Yes.
discussion point, so to speak. Okay, good. Any further questions of the consultant? Well, thank you very much. I know you did a ton of work in this municipality, a ton of needed work in this municipality. Stormwater concerns are top of mind for this council, so we do appreciate you coming, and I'm hopeful that we'll see better days ahead for stormwater in the municipality of Brighton.
Thank you very much.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman. The council receives the report regarding the Stormwater Master Plan Class Environmental Assessment, and further that council adopt the Stormwater Master Plan Class Environmental Assessment for the Brighton urban area. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Blanc?
I would like to receive it and possibly not adopt it tonight till we get all the budgets and the manpower and everything that it takes till staff has a good chance to look at it all. It's a very good plan. We have to do it, but I just want to make sure the money and the budget and everything's there because we got a lot of other budget items that have to come.
Councillor Rowley?
I would like to agree with Councillor LeBlanc on that I would, as long as the timeline doesn't really interfere with a whole lot of other things and we don't lose the plan by not approving it tonight or approving the recommendations, I would like to wait as well until we have at least a first look at our budget.
Councillor Tadman?
I agree with the other two councillors, and I'd like to refer it to staff and as soon as possible have a report come back with your recommendations, how we move forward. But as far as the whole stormwater master plan, I think we need to move on that quickly so that they can get it adopted too. So if I don't know how long you'd need to bring a report back, a month, would that be okay?
Go ahead.
Through you, Your Worship. In speaking with Linda Whitfield, we've already adjusted those numbers in the budget, and we're both pretty confident that we can absorb the increase without any kind of substantial effect on anything. I'm realizing some savings in road construction by not contracting out our surface treatment prep, and we're going to do it in-house. So aside from purchasing some equipment, I think we'll realize enough savings there to at least cover the stormwater management plan.
Okay.
For the
Deputy
next year.
Mayor?
Thank you. I have to say I disagree because it is our job to make it work in the budget, and we've already heard from staff that there are those possibilities, so I'd really like to just see us keep continuing on with this. It's been a long process.
Councillor Tadman?
And I can change my mind after listening to Preston. So, yeah, because I still want to go ahead with the whole plan itself. So if you've talked to Linda and worked out budget amounts.
We assumed it was Deputy Mayor Vink's supreme debating skills that allowed you to change your mind, Councillor.
Well, it
Councillor
was sort of that, but more the Director of Public Works, to tell you the truth. I don't want to give her all the credit.
Councillor Anderson?
I just want to make sure we don't miss the window to get it done right this year.
Here. Councillor LeBlanc?
So whatever that takes.
I can change my mind too.
Oh, good boy.
Now that we know that the budget has been looked at, I'm okay, and with Preston has looked at it as roads and ground, I'll change my mind. It's a good report, it needs to be done.
Councillor Bateman?
I don't have to change my mind because I hadn't made it up yet.
There you go.
But what you were just talking about was the budget, so does that mean, because we talked about a tax levy, so how does that equate?
Well, we don't know. All we know is
the
that
unknown, right?
the first draft budget, the staff have been able to figure out how they can make this work for the first draft budget. It'll be up to council what we fund, and even if we adopt this plan and we choose not to fund it at its full level, staff will have to figure out what that looks like at the end of the day, but that'll be council's decision. I frankly will support funding it to its fullest. I think stormwater is a huge issue in this municipality, and we need to start going down the road, and there it is. There's my say for now. So I'm calling the question. One more.
Yeah, no, I agree, it's very important. I just, when it gets to that point, we're gonna have to really work on the numbers, because it's gonna be a tough sell for people that are on stormwater if we're gonna hit them with a tax levy that don't use it.
I hear ya. Preston, Mr. Parkinson.
I just wanted council to be aware that we don't have the staff resources to do what the plan suggests, so there is a staffing increase in the budget of a half of a full-time equivalent position to kind of manage that, and that's going to be built in with the wastewater division, because stormwater is essentially just another branch of wastewater, so I just wanted to make council aware of that.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried unanimously. Our next report is the 2019 Health and Safety Corporate Policy Statement. I suspect it won't be as robust a discussion as the last one. Thank you all very much for coming out and presenting to us this evening. We appreciate it very much. Mr. Miller, we've received your report. We've read it. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
No, it's just an annual statement that council approves each year. It's legislated that we do that, so this is this year's.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I have a motion moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that council receives the report from the Director of Parks and Recreation and approves the 2019 Workplace Health and Safety Policy Statement and responsibilities as attached. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Our next report is the new facility use contract for the Brighton Lions Club. Mr. Miller, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Not at this time. It pretty much follows the previous agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I have a motion moved by Councillor Anderson, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council receives the staff report regarding the Brighton Lions Club five-year agreement, and further that council directs staff to prepare a bylaw authorizing the mayor and clerk to enter into a new 5-year agreement with the Brighton Lions Club for their continued use of the King Edward Park Community Centre, as per details provided in the staff report. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Our next report is a proposed 5-year agreement between the municipality of Brighton and the Brighton District Curling Club. And the report was prepared by the CAO, but Mr. Miller, I think you were in attendance, so do you have anything to add or highlight?
Again, it's another 5-year agreement between the curling club and ourselves to essentially look after that building and share in costs.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that council receive the report dated February 19th, 2019, entitled Proposed 5-Year Agreement between the Municipality of Brighton and the Brighton and District Curling Club for operation and maintenance of the Curling Club facility, March 1st, 2019 to February 28th, 2024, and further that the council authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the said agreement. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Our next report is the 2018 Annual Compliance Summary Report for Brighton's drinking water system. Hi. We're talking about the 2018 Annual Compliance and Summary Report for the Brighton drinking water system. We've read the report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, Mr. Parkinson?
No, I don't, Your Worship.
I have a motion moved by Councillor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Tadman, that council receive the 2018 Annual Compliance and Summary Report for Brighton's drinking water system as information. Are there any questions? Councillor Tadman.
Not a question, but it's always good to get a really good report card, and I think we should be really proud that we have great water in Brighton. And the other thing, because I think you were at the last, when we took the study up in Campbellford, And I mentioned at the time, it would be nice to have a tour of the water plant, the sewage treatment plant, whatever. So but I guess that would be on your itinerary for some time during the nice weather anyway, so.
Yeah, anytime. It's mostly an indoor facility anyway, so anytime, I guess that could be set up maybe through the mayor.
I think the intention is to get through budget, and then we'll start doing some tours into the spring, but we have some priorities.
Yeah, and I would rather go in the spring too.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Mr. Burrows. Yeah. All those in favor of accepting the report regarding the annual compliance regarding drinking water? All in favor? Opposed? Motion's carried. Next report is the Brighton YMCA inspection shower rooms. Mr. Parkinson, we've read the report. Do you have anything to add or highlight?
Just want to make a note to council that this was just brought to our attention a couple of weeks ago. It's been an ongoing issue, I guess, for a number of years. I don't know why it wasn't addressed, but it is quite urgent in nature just due to the mold in the facility. The tiles that are lifting off the floor, there's kind of holes in the wall where the drywall is barely supporting tile anymore. So that's why we had the sense of urgency to bring it to council now pre-budget so that we can get a move on that project now. The estimate is quite sturdy, I guess you could say. I think it'll come in less than that, but we just wanted to make sure that we had enough funds in there because we haven't fully evaluated the issue. I think the ventilation system that exhausts from those bathrooms needs to be upgraded to some extent, so we wanted to make sure we had enough buffer room in there to get the project completed, and I didn't have to come back and ask for additional funds again. So I think the estimate is firm, and we can get the work done that needs to be done to bring that facility up to standards.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that council authorize staff to issue a tender document for repairs to the shower stalls at 170 Main Street in advance of the budget process, and further that council authorize staff to add the cost of this project to the long-term borrowing for the expansion of 170 Main Street. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a little disappointing and disheartening to see these kind of things. If we were, we were sold a bill of goods here, and now these are, another $50,000, $60,000 is a lot of money on top of this building that's already costing us a pretty high load. It's just disappointing, I guess, that when the building was purchased, that some of these items weren't looked after then.
Thank you, Councillor Bateman.
It's kind of along the same lines as Councillor Rowley. I'm more disappointed, like you just found out. So is this due to like the mold and stuff? Is this because they're not cleaning them properly and stuff? This doesn't affect it. If we have to do it, we have to do it, right? But if we're going to do it, I want some kind of assurance I'm not going to have to do it again in 2 years.
As I read the report, it's because of improper installation of the original grout and poor ventilation, essentially. Do I have that about right?
Yes, and just to note, according to the building permit, these renovations were done 15 years ago. So that is quite a lifespan for a facility like this. Lack of maintenance did play because the vents have never been cleaned. So it's been restricted airflow since. So lifespan of that kind of facility and maintenance did play a factor, but it certainly wasn't cleaning.
You have a follow-up, Councillor Bateman?
Yeah. Seeing how we have scheduled construction or soon to be, can that be rolled in with the same organization for the expansion or the correction of this bathroom?
I'm sure staff are looking at that, and we'll be considering all options. Councillor Tadman?
I just want to remind everybody that it was stated by Councillor Rowley, we paid a lot of money for that building. We really didn't. And the other thing is that the rent that we accumulate is the extra rent is going into a reserve so that for these kind of things. So it's going to end up paying for itself, the repairs eventually.
Councillor Anderson?
I would think inspections, that's municipal property, right? So our inspection should have brought that out, I think, too. So I don't know what method we have of reporting how often those buildings are inspected, even though there might be a tenant there, but it's like curling clubs and things like that. We should have a report of our assets at some point showing concerns like that. So.
I wouldn't disagree, but we're early days in the ownership cycle of that building. We haven't owned it for very long.
Okay, so going forward, then it should be on the radar, I guess.
I would bet that Public Works has it high on their radar.
I don't question our new Public Works Director.
Deputy Mayor, did you have a question? Thank you. Anything else? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. We have one notice of motion this evening, so I'll just reiterate for some members of council who may not be aware, a notice of motion is simply that. It's a notice that a motion will be brought forward at the next meeting. I will read it, and then we will go on to the next line item in the agenda. Moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor Bateman, that council dedicate Children's Library in memory of William Pettengill, a long-serving mayor of the municipality of Brighton, a lifelong educator in the public schools in our municipality, and a former active member of the Brighton Public Library Board, and that this dedication be made during the opening ceremonies of the new renovated library and of renovations to the municipal building, and further, that council grant permission to Joan Pettengill, wife of the late William Pettengill, to donate a bench to be placed outside the municipal building, public library main doors, under the canopy. This motion will come forward at the next meeting. There's no unfinished business. We'll move into bylaws. I have a motion moved by Councillor LeBlanc, seconded by Councillor Tadman, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date. Being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and the clerk to enter into agreement between the corporation of the municipality of Brighton and the Brighton and District Curling Club. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into agreement with the Lions Club of Brighton. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor LeBlanc, that council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to appoint various committees and boards of council for the term of council 2019 to 2022. Is there any discussion? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Mayor. And maybe I should have asked this when we were speaking about the bylaw for the curling club. If I recall correctly, in the in their document, that should we appoint someone from this council to now sit on the curling club committee, just as we do with Codrington, or is this not the appropriate time to ask that question?
It is an appropriate time to ask this question, since we're appointing members to committees and boards. I would anticipate that council would want to appoint someone to the Brighton District Curling Club committee, just simply for the same reason. Go ahead.
Have we had someone on it before?
In the past,
Yeah,
yes,
that's
but
what I
not
thought.
the past term.
And do we know why?
I don't recall. Neither is the CCA.
I want to go back to the history, maybe because the curling club meets on Mondays and council meets on Mondays, and I believe that's why a council rep couldn't attend the curling club meetings. But I know over the years, I believe, in fact, the previous mayor sat on the curling club board, and I think other members of council have in years previous to that. But because I think there was a conflict with the night of the meetings, that we didn't have anything from them. But I'm thinking now, if we're, like I said, the same thing with Codrington, I would think that we're going to kind of fall under the same kind of thing.
If we're going to follow the same pattern of, I would agree that it would be appropriate. You may.
The curling club and same as for the Codrington, they're not really advisory committees of council. They're a board basically that does the renting and whatnot of the facilities.
They are.
The users of the
Yeah.
facilities, but they're not advisory committees.
And the premise behind appointing a council rep on either or both boards would be that they have a fiduciary responsibility over a building we own. So it is appropriate for a member of council to be at the CCA board so they can offer advice to the CCA board with regard to what council is doing and bring back any information from the CCA for councils. And I think the BDCC is no different in that same respect. And if the meetings conflict with the times we meet, well, then that would be up to the council rep to try to figure out how to be a good representative without maybe being able to attend the meetings.
Or
Councillor
maybe we
Tadman?
ask them to change their meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, or we ask them to change the time they meet.
So if we're just having a rep from council, why can't we just do that now instead of going through this? Because we don't have to put it out, advertise it.
We don't have to advertise it. We can appoint by motion, we don't need to appoint by bylaw. It's just council.
Yeah, let's just do it then. Get it done.
Well, I have a motion on the floor, so let's get through this and then we'll see if we can put another motion on the floor. How's that sound? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion's carried. I'm all ears, Councillor Tadman.
Okay, I'll move that we appoint someone from the council to sit on the curling club as a member.
Are there any volunteers so we could actually name a name? Councillor Anderson, you want to do that? Is everyone okay with Councillor Anderson?
I'd move that Councillor Anderson sits on the curling club.
Yeah, I'll second that.
I think we have like 25 motions on the floor. That's fantastic. I think the clerk's writing it up, so we'll wait to see what she has to say. I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman and seconded by Councillor Rowley that council appoint Councillor Anderson as the curling club representative. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? The motion is carried. Congratulations, Councillor Anderson. I'm sure you'll do a fine job. I have a motion moved by Councillor Tadman, seconded by Councillor Rowley, that council receive the correspondence from Scott Anderson and Mary Anderson regarding the Lower Trent Conservation Authority. Is there any discussion? Councillor Tadman?
In all fairness, Mr. Anderson had the opportunity to come and say why he was upset, and the member from Lower Trent is here. I think in all fairness, we should allow her to at least speak to that, because that's a lot of bashing there. And I know it's correspondence, but Mayor, I ask that you give her permission to speak.
It's up to council. We got 2, 3, okay. Janet, would you like to speak to the Andersons' correspondence dated February 6, 2019? I'm sure you've read it.
Do you want a copy?
Could you push the lavender button in front of you? There you go.
There we go. Thank you very much. Yeah, I was able to read the correspondence from the agenda package, so it wasn't circulated to us, but we have had dealings with Mr. Anderson in the past. I think the application that he's referring to so far at Lower Trent is only been a pre-consultation at this stage. Part of the issues Mr. Anderson has brought forward is some of the requirements under the growth plan. So the Greater Golden Horseshoe growth plan, there's requirements because of the proposed severance. Things have changed since his last severance that he gave to his daughter. There's just different legislation in place, there are different provincial policies in place, and we were aiding the municipality's planning department in identifying which studies are required to move forward with that. We have not received a formal, actually a severance application or a consent application at this point. It's just been pre-consultation. So he's not happy with the some of the requirements under mostly the environmental impact study, but there are identified hazards on the property, such as the floodplain and the erosion hazards that he did mention. Brighton is working with neighboring municipalities on an updated Lake Ontario shoreline management plan, which is going to identify these hazards. We are very well aware that some of these hazards are not accurately depicted in the information that we have back from 1990, the last shoreline management plan that was done. So we are in the process of updating that information, but we have to use the information we have on hand at the time. So that's kind of where I'm aware of where this application is at. I can understand his frustration. He hasn't really addressed it to us, so yeah.
Thank you.
If you have any questions. Okay.
No. No, I'm not going to open the floor to questions. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate your time. All those in favor of receiving the correspondence? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Oh, we're here already. Isn't that wonderful? So open the floor to questions from members of the public. If you have a question with regard to something on tonight's agenda, please come forward and ask your question. No one? You're awesome people. We have no in-camera session this evening. I have a motion moved by Deputy Mayor Vink, seconded by Councillor Bateman. The council gives a bylaw its first, second, and third reading and finally passes on this date, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Corporation of the Municipality of Brighton meeting held on February 19th, 2019. Is there any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried. Bless you. And I have a motion moved by Councillor Bateman, seconded by Councillor Anderson, that the February 19th, 2019 council meeting be adjourned at 8:16 p.m. All those in favor? Any opposed? All those in favor? Any opposed? The motion is carried.